Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday Tea with me, Alisha Bowker Mudrock. It's great to have our guest Monica on today, and I'm so excited to have her here to again just sort of like capitalize on the conversation we've been having so far this year, just around the new year energy. For some that might be high, for some that might already be feeling low this middle of this month, but we'll kind of get into that, but just kind of where we can go from here and let her share her expertise and knowledge and wisdom with us on ways to tackle those mixed feelings and keep the momentum up and really get focused on where we're headed. But first, I'm going to let Monica introduce herself so we all can know where she's coming from, who she is, what she's up to, and then we'll dive in. So welcome, Monica.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Monica Helvie. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist in California and in Texas, but I'm also a trauma-informed burnout recovery coach for burnt out career women who are passionate about their work, their health, and their relationships. So these are multi-passionate women.
Yeah.
And when I am not supporting my clients and working on one of my businesses, you can find me and my husband probably in the stands of one of my kids' games because we have three very active sports kiddos. And so, yeah, you can find me in the stands just cheering for them. And that's a little bit about me.
I love that. What kind of sports do they play?
Okay, so I have one that does cheer, one that just wrapped up football in the fall. He does baseball in the spring. Another one that's doing 7-on-7 in baseball and basketball. Like
All the things.
literally all the things. Yeah.
Almost everything. I love it. I love it.
So
But that's
any
awesome.
stands, pick a stance, we're there.
Yeah, she's like, I'm there and I can do it and I know the rules enough. So
Enough to cheer,
yeah,
exactly.
I love it. Well, it's so good to have you here. I know you were impacted by some of this winter weather. I know a lot of the folks I work with were impacted by winter weather and um, the fires and all the wildness that's happening just in the first few weeks of this year already. So even before we got on here, we were talking a little bit about just that oscillation of energy and burnout, not even professionally, but just like it's already been a long year for some, for others are still revving to go.
Yeah.
So just from your own level of expertise and the things that you are passionate about working with your clients, I'll kind of let you start the conversation where you think you want to jump in, but what would be some helpful ways in which folks can, regardless of maybe what side of the fence they're starting from, but really still tune in, maybe in this little half hour, really just get to be with themselves, give back to themselves, and think about, okay, we still have a lot of year ahead. It's not just like it's all over. And kind of how do we build on whatever energy we're starting with and make 2025 the year of us?
Yeah, yeah. I think that there's a good amount of folks who are already beginning this year fried, like they're already burnt out. And for some, that could be that their holidays weren't restorative, like it wasn't like a
Mm,
restful, restorative pause. For some, it's because they didn't have any time or take enough time. For some, they might have started the year feeling like ready to go, and then life just sucker punched us, you know?
yeah.
And so I think first things first, when we're thinking about like new year, new me, or like what we want our year to look like, and we're thinking about the vision of what's in front of us, the first thing we have to come back to is an attunement to our capacity. Like we have to
Mm,
be able to recognize where we are in this chapter, in this present moment.
mm-hmm.
Um, because the reality is we only have a limited amount of time, resources,
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so before we can even start to think about our, quarter one, quarter two, our long-term goals, what we want to accomplish and who we want to be at the end of the year, we have to first take inventory with what we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really exploring and respecting your capacity is like step one.
Hmm. I love that. And what would be some ways you would recommend people can do that? Because obviously, I think I understand it in general, but I think sometimes people get stuck on the actual, okay, now what does that mean, or how does
Yeah,
that look?
sure.
So, what would you offer some suggestions on actually getting in there to review
Yeah.
it?
So, like I said, there's really three main areas that you can evaluate your capacity. It's like your time, your resources, and your energy. And so
Mm-hmm.
some like practical something you can do is like as you're sitting down and you're casting your vision for what you want this year to look like, what like maybe you want to write that book, or maybe you want to launch that program, or maybe you want to start that business, whatever your big hairy scary goals are. Like if you're thinking in your mind like, okay, I want to do this by the end of the year, you have to kind of work backwards a little bit. Like if I want to launch this thing, you know, let's say before December, you have to have a sense of like when you're going to start writing the emails to tell people you're doing
Yeah.
it. And then before that, like who you're going to contact to help you like market the thing or whatever, right? Like, so you have to work backwards from your end goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you sort of know, like, this is the thing I want to do, and okay, wow, February is when I'm supposed to hit the ground running. That's when you then have to look at, okay, with the time and the resources and the capacity that I have,
Mm-hmm.
does this actually feel like a realistic um, goal in consideration and in alignment with what I'm showing up with? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so as an example, like let's just get like kind of practical. So if you are setting your quarter one goals and you're recognizing like, okay, I have really low time,
Mm-hmm.
I have really limited resources,
Mm-hmm.
and I have no energy because the holidays did me dirty, right?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, maybe it's not the right quarter to launch that thing. Like maybe this needs to be a
Right.
quarter two or quarter three launch,
Right. Right.
right? But it's again coming back in check with like what is your current capacity? Does that kind of help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think it's like I always, you don't want to catastrophize something, but you don't want to sugarcoat something, right? Because
Yeah.
both have are detrimental to actually helping us achieve or do what we need to do. You know, if you're going to start the race and you're pretending like, oh, it's like I'm already on mile 10, I only have 10 more to go, but you're still at the starting line, like that's not mentally helpful, right? But if I'm like, I can't do this. Well, like, yes, you know, I can't put the shoes on, get out there, then the like over dramatization of it doesn't help either. So, but I think it is truly figuring out like, let me just be honest, no judgment, but just here's
No,
literally where I'm at. Like the tanks are this full or this empty. And then let me
exactly.
work from what I'm actually starting from. Again, not that like really dramatically or overly optimistic in a way that's unhelpful, or just like totally dramatic where
Undulating
that's
the other
also not
way.
real either. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And that's the thing is like having some self-honesty, but also some respect for the reality. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
are honest with yourself, like without judgment, just recognizing like, yeah, I really don't have a lot of time. Like if I'm looking at
Mm.
like my kids are going back to school and
Yeah.
the sports things and whatever,
Yeah.
like if you're looking at your calendar and you're like, no, like realistically, I don't have a ton of time to work on this thing.
Yeah.
Um, Without judgment, if you can respect that
Mm.
truth about yourself, then you can prioritize your vision, but in a way where you're aligned with your capacity. And that's going to protect you so much from like feeling like you're missing the mark and disappointed and stuck and overwhelmed and burnt out and all the things.
What would you say to someone? Because I also can hear a pushback there, though, of like, but if I don't do it now, it won't happen. Or I wish it should be done in Q1, or everyone else can do this in
Uh-huh.
Q1. Why can't I? Or, you know, like, even if
Yeah.
I'm honest about where I'm starting from, or there's maybe just disappointment around the fact that it can't happen in the timeline I first imagined. And maybe
Yeah.
that's okay, but it doesn't feel great. You know, how would one navigate some of those other unhelpful thoughts or judgments or feelings
Yeah.
if we have to kind of negotiate our timeline differently or scale back in a way we weren't wanting to or planning to maybe.
Totally. So comparisonitis and FOMO are a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is like the clients that I work with that struggle the most with comparisonitis, I'm really working with them in like coming back to their own self, to their own body. And
Mm-hmm.
again, having that self compassion to recognize that, hey, your capacity is totally different than my capacity.
Yeah.
The thing you're like, the thing that's on your heart to do and to, bring to life in 2025 is different than the thing that's on my heart and mind. Right. And
Right.
so we're really not starting in the same place, and we're really not even going to end in the same place.
No.
So when you see somebody doing their thing in their lane, like they're on a completely different path than yours, right? So if we can come back and pull into our own energy and be really rooted in that, that really helps to soften a lot of the FOMO and comparisonitis and the shoulds and the like, I got to keep up, like, because really we're just running our own race in our own lane, doing our own thing. You
Yes.
know, that's the
Yes.
reality, but it requires that regulation and like tethered centeredness to stay with that reality.
Yeah.
And so I think like the other thing that I was going to share, I guess we can go there too, is like when you know your values, that helps you to stay really anchored. And so when you can be intentional and aligned with your own values, then you know, like, this is for me, and there's no other should that I should be doing because this is my
Right.
should.
This is it.
You know? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have a way that you explain or encourage folks to be able to even identify their values? I know there's like lots of maybe angles we
Yeah.
can come at it. So I'm curious kind of like your take on it.
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts. It's actually like the entire week one of my program. So like I have a lot of thoughts on that. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of different directions we can go. But what's interesting is that like a lot of folks actually don't know what their values are. So when it's like, hey, knowing your values can help you stay rooted, there's a lot of folks who are like, cool, don't know what that is, don't know how to get there. That means nothing, right? Like
Right.
it doesn't
Yeah.
really like hold. Um, and so one of the ways that I explain it is like your values are actually pretty different than your needs. Like we have like basic needs and human needs that are like foundational. And once those are met, then in our nervous system, our values can be considered. So when our fundamental needs aren't met, our values are sort of like off in the distance, right? Like because we're in survival mode, trying to make sure that our fundamental needs are met. Okay. So if you're struggling to even identify your values, like just know that that makes sense. And there's no like judgment or shame or shoulds, like you make sense. But when you can have those fundamental needs met, like for example, the folks in LA, right? Like if you don't have housing or water or shelter, like basic needs for safety,
Right.
Aligning with your values is like
It's not where
something
you
to
need to
do
start.
when you have safety.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So just permission for the folks who are really wanting to be aligned to their values, but not knowing where to start. Like, it's okay. Like, just let's deal with the needs first, and then we can get to that part. So yeah, understanding that they're different is like important to first get clarity about. And then again, in my program, like I have like a whole exercise and a whole thing that we do for this, but essentially what I help my folks do is get clear on like their top 5 or 7.
Yep.
So they can really like root down into those values and get really clear on what they mean and what they could look like. And then you can start to seal your energy leaks that are pulling you away from your values when you know what your values are. But a simple way to think about it, like just for the purposes of this, 30 minutes that we're together, is if you were to get really, really sick, like let's think like if you were terminally sick or terminally sick, but like had a severe illness, what would you be doing with your time? Who would you be showing up for? Like, what would you stop doing or immediately take off your plate?
Yeah.
Right? When we can think about these like extreme health things, it can help it be a little bit more black and white as to what we absolutely want and need to be showing up for.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps to clarify our main priorities. And then from there, we can start to see the themes or our core values, right? Like family or like presence with the people I love. Like you can start to really get an essence of what your core values might be when you think a little bit black and white like that.
Yeah. I find too that I like to do this like a version of an exercise like that where I'm really identifying my values. I probably, now that I'm talking about it, like would almost want to do it quarterly, but I definitely do it yearly because I think that our values can change a lot. Sometimes they might, I think they don't change so dramatically where it's like if you're on every ping ponging like wild, but the words that resonate most of how I want to conceptualize or what I'm kind of leaning into or focusing on more definitely like different in different seasons.
Yes.
And I think sometimes though, when we hear the word values, I know I grew up in a more like religious upbringing. So you think like those traditional values that like are
They're
almost
fixed and
archaic and like
finite.
live there,
Yeah.
right? But I
They're,
think
they're
it's,
in stone.
yes, like these are the 10 commandments or the whatever, these are the values. But I think what's kind of freeing and also exciting is to think of them as that might be values in a different setting, but the ones that we're kind of living by meet us where we're at, and they are fluid and they do shift and they do change. And it's like a fun adventure to like learn more about yourself, to really sit and ask those questions. Even if we've asked them before, I would say like ask them again because the answers might look a little bit different. And I think sometimes we
Totally.
forget or we don't realize that this is an ever evolving conversation. It's not just that one and done, these are my top 3 values and I live my life forever in that way, so to speak.
Exactly, because who you are now at this point in time with these resources, with this calling, with this job, whatever, like
Mhm.
with who you are now is probably different than what it looked like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Or like, I guess, yeah, COVID was 5 years ago now, like almost, right? Like, so like who
Yeah.
you were even
Yeah.
pre-COVID,
Pre-COVID.
right? Is
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
in a lot of ways for people, right? And so we have to also, again, have that self-respect or self-compassion for the growth and the change that happens. Like,
Hmm.
we're human people and like one with nature, right? Like, so we have seasons too.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to kind of hold that in mind is that um where you are in your journey right now is probably going to look different than what it is, like you said, in a couple quarters from now.
Hmm.
So it's okay to reevaluate it.
And I think that this almost opens up and gives this nice permission that even if you're not starting the year off at that 10 energy or checking all the boxes, or even if things have to be put on hold or pivot or shift a little bit,
Yep.
that there's still so much year left. And even then, every day is the start of a new year technically, right? So it's not even like it has to be just the calendar year, but it does just help give that like, oh, okay, it's not like it's all failed or it's all black and white or it's
That's
all or nothing,
right.
that there is that nice middle. And with the capacity is that great word you've been using, like where am I at today? What can get done? Where can I make that movement? Where can I align? And also there's so much more time ahead to
Yes.
do more or to maximize or pull back, even whatever it looks like, that this isn't it, right? Like this again is this like evolving conversation and negotiation, but it's not just like a one and done or that we have to have it all figured out today or it's all off the table kind of a thing.
100%. I think a lot of people are turned off by like words like balance because there's this assumption that there's like a scale, right? And it's
Right,
going to be like even on both sides, and
right,
that's balance.
right.
And really what I think of in terms of the work that I do with folks is like it's more like equilibrium. It's
Mm.
more like if you have ever worked out on like one of those Bosu balls, right?
Hmm.
Like
Just
where
did
it's
a
like
workout on one this morning, so I can
for folks
actually
who don't know,
visualize
it's like the flat thing, right? With like the
with the,
ball, like
yep, the half of the
underneath.
ball.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, the ball. So, like, if you're standing on that, right, like you can be balanced, but there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of shifting and energy that's happening
Right.
there. And that's what attunement is. That's what equilibrium and balance is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we're really aiming for is like having this consistent attunement where we're not just like putting our life in autopilot and just saying, like, well, these were my values in January, so they have to be my values in September.
Right.
And like,
Right.
till forever, amen. It's like, no, like, give yourself permission to pay attention to what it's feeling like inside your body in the moment that it's happening. And if it no longer feels aligned or it's feeling like you're off balance,
Yeah.
give yourself that permission to recalibrate and to adjust and to shift.
Yeah. And like just in that same note, I do a lot of Pilates and I also am a Pilates teacher for Matt. And the one thing I love about that specific movement practice is it's often just about a lot of curiosity, but our bodies are never going to show up the same way to the mat every day. Even if you've done this forever, a roll up one day can feel much different than a roll up another day, right? And there's a lot of doing stuff on the rights and the lefts, and one side feels entirely different than the other side, but it's not always the same differences, right? And so I think it is just that idea that the balance in that work isn't like everything has to be even and equal and perfectly the same. It's just being aware and compassionate and ready to kind of lean into or give more space to whatever is feeling tighter or looser or more fluid or whatever else. And it's such a nice almost visual, because then it's just thinking of that in like life in these more abstract terms. But it's that same idea, right? Like work might be like jiving, but personal life just feels like, oh, it's harder. It's like not clicking or communication. But that's okay. So like we're lean into that and make some shifts around there, but like maximize on work feeling great and easy and wonderful. And when that everything feels really good, lean into that. When everything feels hard, lean into that, right? So I think it is just such a nice, again, like other form of permission that we're just like, we show up differently every day, and it's supposed to be that way. And instead of it being wrong or bad,
that's just normal. That's what it is.
Capitalizing on it, right? And saying like, yes, now what do I do with this? Like, where am I at today? And how can I make this the best day for me? Kind of a thing.
100%, right? And again, it's being able to pay attention to that difference.
Yes.
And so for a lot of folks, at least the folks that I tend to work most with, like these high achievers that are like thriving and like, super ambitious women, they sometimes will struggle with that awareness piece, like just the ability to tune into their own body and what does it feel like? What feels different today? Like having that awareness sometimes takes some work and some training. And so again, if that's you, listener out there, like that's okay. That makes sense, and start small. It can start with being very like intentional, having, like little reminders, like on sticky notes, like in your mirror, like how do my shoulders feel? Are they up by my ears? Like, does my throat feel tight? Like prompts to check in with yourself until it becomes a little bit more like natural. Fluid, right? Natural, exactly. And for a lot of folks who are already in like fitness industry or like health industry, they tend to have some ability to reflect and tune in. But just speaking for myself, like I was a therapist for a number of years operating in functional disconnect. So like no shade, like it happens. People can be very high functioning and also very disconnected from their own internal experience. So
100%. Because it feels like it sounds as if it should just come so naturally or simply, but it doesn't, and same. My first job out of grad school was when I lived in New York, and it was all trauma and all mostly kids and really hard. And I didn't know what, who knows what you're doing in your first job anyways. And then like, it's really sad shit all day. And I'm like, and I had the worst headaches, the worst stomach aches, like, but I just didn't connect that was like all my unfelt feelings about the vicarious trauma I was dealing with all day, and plus the personal stuff that was going on at 23 and living in New York City, and all the things. So it's like I'm a whole new person now, but I was a therapist. I went to school. I had a master's degree. Like I knew this stuff, but it doesn't mean that it just comes so naturally that I'm always able to put that together, or that we're also doing that for ourselves, right? And especially if you just had no awareness or didn't really even think about some of these things, then why would you? It's not just something you're just naturally going to start doing without the education or the prompting or that awareness to start doing it, kind of a thing.
Exactly. But that is part of why it's so easy to slowly misalign with your values and with what your body needs and what your capacity is. Like if it's not a consistent practice for you yet, which again, it makes sense if you haven't had the training, if you haven't had the awareness or whatever. But when you don't live congruently, when you don't live in alignment with your needs and your values and your vision and your capacity, you're so much more vulnerable to chronic
being taken off
unresolved
course.
stress and burnout and misalignment.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. No, it's so real. And I think I'm just such a visual going back to like the Pilates practice. I've done it for so long. I know when I'm not in alignment or when things feel off
Sure.
because I know what it's supposed to, or ideally what it feels like, or what I generally can do. And again, it's not a bad or good thing. It's just like, oh, okay, like I'm tight. I'm sitting too much or whatever. But
Mhm.
if I didn't know, or I wasn't putting those connections or being aware in my body, yeah, you could just keep doing the practice and just next thing you know, you're way over here, hurting yourself, not doing things right, not at all where the goals you were trying to get to, because it's such a subtle and nuanced little like the current just changes up
Like a
slightly,
micro
right? It's
movement.
not like a
Yeah,
dramatic
exactly.
big thing like, wow, we took a hard left turn.
Which is why so many folks can like start a career and love a
Mhm.
career and be like, this is the goal. And then they're like, how did I get here? I hate this job, right? Like, it's
Yeah,
like, whoa, like
yeah,
they might have missed those subtle, more nuanced shifts
yep,
that was their nervous system signaling to them, hey, this doesn't feel right anymore. I don't like this. This is feeling hard, heavy, and tight and tense. And they
right,
miss those little signals. And so now they're in this place where they're feeling really unfulfilled and
right,
dissatisfied and
right.
disconnected.
Or I'm thinking of my mom clients who, were like, wake up one day and they're like, who am I? What happened?
Right.
Because they wanted the kid, they wanted the family, they wanted these things.
Yeah.
And it's great. But like, if you're not keeping in touch with who you are through such a transformative change already, it's
Yeah.
very easy to also end up and be like, but who am I? What am I doing? What
Do
do
I
I
even
like?
like this
Yeah.
anymore?
Like,
Yeah,
so,
100%.
yeah,
Exactly.
no,
Mhm.
I love that. Well, I'm watching time. I know we could just keep going, but what,
I know.
as like maybe like a summary or kind of like a thing to take away from this conversation and kind of just leave folks with that last nugget of wisdom or knowledge, what might be something you want to kind of like,
Yeah. So what I want to say is again, with awareness comes choice, and that comes the ability to have some like power and
mm,
uh intention, right? So but we have to have the awareness first. So we have to know what our values are, we have to know how it's feeling in our body before we can have more choices about what's for us or what's not going to be for us.
right.
So, strongly like get into that work, learn yourself, learn your nervous system's cues for safety and for dysregulation so that you can pick up on those little subtleties that are letting you know, hey, this vision, although it sounded great in January, is no longer for me. And let's give ourselves permission to push that back a quarter or maybe
Yeah.
put it in the parking lot for now,
Scrap it.
like, it's
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So having that practice and that attunement with your nervous system, having regular moments and check-ins for self-reflection, having clear boundaries around like, if this is the vision and these are my values, like then this is what we're doing. Like this is the path for us. And like
Mm,
we're not gonna shit ourselves out of our lane because like
mm-hmm. This is
this
the
is where I'm
lane.
supposed
This
to
is
be.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So those would be my tips for how folks can have more of like a sustainable success and
Mm-hmm.
alignment with their values as they're setting their visions for 2025.
And I love it because I think it really just can meet anyone where they're at, whatever energy level or capacity they're coming in with. Those are all great tips and tools to consider and maximize on the capacity and energy that you personally have on this
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
And so
Well,
I guess I'll just say like if people don't feel like if they're like, I want to know more about that, or I don't really know
mhm.
what even my nervous system is or how to do that, can I just like plug like you
Yeah,
2.0?
I was just about to say, and how can people find you more or get to, like if they want to know more about you? So definitely plug
Yeah.
away. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like literally the work we do inside my program, U 2.0. Like week one is all about like realigning with your core values, finding the energy leaks, sealing those up. And then week 2 and 3 is really all about like learning how to map your states and regulate your nervous
Mm,
system. And then from there, we go into like repatterning the unhelpful beliefs and like the FOMO and the comparisonitis and like really reframing and repatterning some of those beliefs that are driving people off the cliff to burnout. So this is literally all the work that we do inside U 2.0, and we're open for enrollment. There's only a few spots left. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I want in, like it might not be
I
too
know.
late. So
Yeah.
sign up, like, yeah, reach out. Yeah, so that is going on. It's an 8-week group. So yeah.
Okay, I love that. And I'll
Yeah.
make sure to have all Monica's links for her for that site, her social
Yeah.
things that you guys can contact, follow her, check out more of what she's
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram. It's
Yes,
Monica Helvie LMFT, and you can like see all the links for my freebies, like burnout checklist and information on you 2.0 and how to work with me and all that stuff.
I love it. I love it. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here. Such great wisdom and things to have folks think about and learn from. So I appreciate the conversation, and hope everyone has a great rest of their Tuesday. We'll see you
Bye.
later. Bye.